Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving deep into 1920s Vienna, a city bursting with intellectual energy.
You could say that again.
We're uncovering the story of the Vienna Circle, philosophers and scientists who wanted to shake up how we think about the world.
Yeah, total revolution in thought.
And get this, we're exploring their story through the lens of their Wikipedia page.
Like stepping into a time machine. We're not just talking dusty old theories.
Right.
This was a group smack dab in the middle of all the craziness happening around them. New scientific discoveries, social and political upheaval, the works.
Exactly. And their story begins even before the name Vienna Circle was a thing. Just picture it. Informal gatherings as early as 1907.
Oh, wow.
A sort of like pre-Vienna Circle think tank?
You could say that. It was a time of intense intellectual energy in Vienna. Think about it. You've got Philip Frank,
Okay.
a physicist obsessed with like the philosophical side of scientific discoveries.
Because.
Then there's Hans Hahn pushing the boundaries of math and logic, and Otto Neurath. This guy was all over the place. Math, political economy.
So we have a physicist, a mathematician, and a political economist all in one room.
Exactly.
This was not your average philosophy club.
It wasn't. They were pulling from all these different fields.
Yeah. So interdisciplinary.
From the get-go, grappling with questions that went way beyond any single subject.
Huh. Kind of how a lot of academic fields are structured today.
You got it. But these early meetings needed a little something to really take off.
Okay. The missing ingredient.
Yeah, and that ingredient arrived in 1922.
1922, was it like a big scientific breakthrough?
Not a breakthrough exactly, but the arrival of a key player. Moritz Schlick.
I see.
He snagged the philosophy chair position at the University of Vienna.
That's a pretty big deal.
Huge. A prestigious position. He could shape the whole direction of philosophy there.
So Schlick was like the catalyst that finally brought everyone together.
You could say that. He was already a big name in the philosophy of science, known for his super rigorous analytical way of thinking. And Schlick's arrival in Vienna, it was like a magnet.
Pulling in all these bright minds.
Who'd been orbiting each other for years.
So 1924, the official start of the Vienna Circle.
Yeah.
That must have been a wild time to be in Vienna if you were into philosophy or science.
Imagine the energy in those rooms. You've got big names like Schlick, Hahn, Neurath,
Yeah.
mixing with all these eager young students.
Right.
All united by this desire to push the limits of what we know.
Driven by knowledge.
Totally. And it wasn't just boring lectures and dry academic stuff.
Right.
This was a vibrant back and forth of ideas.
A real exchange.
Yeah, fueled by this shared passion to understand the world in a totally new way.
And to fuel that passion, they were reading everything and everyone.
Yeah.
Ernst Mach, David Hilbert, Henri Poincaré, Pierre Duhem.
Keep going.
They even dove into the works of these giants in logic and language. Gottlob Frege, Bertrand Russell, and Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Wow.
And of course, Albert Einstein's theories were blowing everyone's minds. The Vienna Circle was definitely paying attention.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about all that brain power in one group.
Yeah.
And they weren't just passively absorbing these ideas either.
Right.
They were actively weaving them together, challenging them, and forging their own unique path.
Makes sense. And they weren't content to keep their discussions behind closed doors either.
No.
They wanted to spread their ideas, make them accessible.
Yeah. That's why they started the Ernst Mach Society in 1928.
Okay.
They were on a mission to share this scientific world conception.
Kitschy name.
I know, right? Rooted in Enlightenment ideals. Reason and evidence would be the guides to a better future.
I like it.
Me too.
It's so interesting how their philosophy was tied to their social and political views.
Yeah.
They weren't just philosophers in an ivory tower.
Right.
They were really engaged with the world around them.
Totally. And then came 1929, the year of their manifesto, the scientific conception of the world, the Vienna Circle.
Bold title.
I know, right? This wasn't just another boring academic paper.
It was a statement.
Yeah. A rallying cry for a new way of thinking about philosophy and its role in society.
Interesting.
Think of it as their mission statement to the world.
Okay. I like that.
Laying out their core principles, empiricism and logical analysis.
So let's break those down a bit. Empiricism.
Yeah.
It's the idea that knowledge has to be based on experience, on things we can see and test.
You got it. They believed that you shouldn't just accept things blindly or rely on abstract ideas.
Right.
Real knowledge has got to have a foundation in the real world.
It's got to be tangible.
Exactly. And that's where logical analysis comes in.
Okay.
They wanted to use the tools of logic to make philosophical problems clearer to weed out meaningless statements.
Get rid of the fluff.
Yeah, and get to the heart of the matter.
So they were bringing a more scientific method to philosophy.
That's a good way to put it. And they weren't afraid to challenge traditional metaphysics.
Which they saw as dealing with a lot of claims that you couldn't actually verify.
Exactly. But they didn't just critique old ideas. They wanted to build something new.
Okay, I like that.
That's where their ambitious project of creating a unified science comes into play.
Unified science.
Yeah. They imagined a system where all scientific statements could be connected,
Wow.
building upon this foundation of shared principles and real-world evidence.
Okay, so instead of all these separate disciplines, each with their own language,
Right.
they were looking for a way to bring all the sciences together.
Under one big unifying umbrella,
I liked it.
a coherent, integrated scientific worldview.
Very cool. And they didn't just talk about it?
Nope. They actually took action. They started these publication projects,
Oh, whoa.
like the Einheitswissenschaft, a whole book series.
The Cook series.
Yeah, dedicated to exploring all aspects of this unified science idea.
Wow.
And get this, they even started working on an international encyclopedia of unified science.
That's so ambitious.
I know, right?
Right.
Really shows how committed they were to this vision.
This is all so forward-thinking.
It really is.
We haven't even gotten to the political side of things and the events that would eventually scatter the Vienna Circle.
It's a wild story.
I know, right? But before we do that,
I think it's important to understand just how radical their critique of traditional metaphysics really was.
okay, so not just an academic debate.
Not at all. It was deeply tied to the social and political climate of their time.
Got it. I'm ready to hear more.
Okay, well, just imagine Europe in the 1920s and 30s,
Okay.
a time of rising nationalism,
Okay.
Political propaganda was everywhere,
Yeah.
growing distrust of intellectuals and elites. It was a mess.
So not exactly a stable time.
Not at all. And the Vienna Circle, they saw firsthand how language could be twisted, manipulated to spread lies and sow discord.
So their critique of metaphysics,
Yeah.
it wasn't just some abstract philosophical exercise.
Definitely not. They believed that by showing the flaws of traditional metaphysics
Right.
with all those vague claims that couldn't be verified,
Okay.
they could create a more rigorous way of using language. They saw it as a way to combat all this irrationality,
Yeah.
promote a more informed public discourse.
They were like fighting fake news way before it was even a thing.
That's a great way to put it. They recognized that language could be used as a weapon
Powerful.
to hide the truth and manipulate people.
Right.
Their focus on clarity and logic, it was like disarming that weapon.
Wow. Okay, so let's get into their critique of metaphysics a bit more.
Sure.
What kind of statements would have set off alarm bells for them?
Let's say someone claims that the universe is fundamentally spiritual.
Okay,
The Vienna Circle would be like, hold on, what does that even mean? How could you ever test that?
I see. They wanted proof, a way to connect those big statements to something concrete in the world.
Exactly. They argued that any meaningful statement has to be based on experience.
Things we can observe and test.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're just empty words, open to any interpretation and with no real substance.
But doesn't that limit us too much?
How so?
I mean, some of the biggest questions in life, like the meaning of life, the nature of consciousness, those go beyond what we can directly see and measure.
That's a question philosophers still debate today.
I bet.
The Vienna Circle's point wasn't to completely shut down those big questions,
Right.
but to be more careful about how we talk about them.
To be more precise.
Right. They believed that by sticking to what we can actually talk about meaningfully, what we can test and verify,
Yeah.
that's how we make real progress in philosophy and science.
So it was about setting boundaries for meaningful discussion,
Yeah.
not dismissing whole areas of thought.
Exactly. It's like drawing a line between speculation and genuine knowledge.
Interesting.
They weren't trying to kill imagination or creativity,
Right.
but to create a more solid foundation for understanding the world.
It makes you wonder what they'd say about all this stuff we see today.
Like what?
Conspiracy theories, social media pronouncements.
Oh, yeah. That's something I think about a lot
Really?
in our world. With so much information, where false information spreads so quickly,
Yeah.
the Vienna Circle's ideas about critical thinking,
Okay.
evidence-based reasoning,
Yeah.
and clear language, they feel super relevant.
I can see that. And their focus on logic and evidence wasn't just an intellectual pursuit either, right?
Yeah.
It was connected to their vision for a better world.
Absolutely. This is where their scientific world conception comes in.
Okay.
They really believed that science could be a force for good.
So it wasn't just about doing experiments in a lab.
Yeah.
It was about applying scientific thinking to social and political issues.
Exactly. Thinkers like Otto Neurath,
Uh-huh.
he was a socialist.
Okay.
He saw a direct link between their philosophy and the fight for social justice.
Interesting.
They believed a scientific approach could lead to a more fair and humane society.
Like in terms of planning and economics.
In education,
So they were trying to connect ideas with action.
totally. Using reason and evidence not just to understand the world,
But to chink.
for the better. And it's important to remember the historical context here.
Yeah.
They were living through a time of crazy social and political change.
Mm-hmm.
The rise of fascism was a direct threat to everything they stood for.
Into their very lives.
Yeah. And that threat would eventually shatter the Vienna Circle,
Right.
forcing many members into exile.
As Nazism spread.
It's a sad reminder of how fragile intellectual freedom can be.
Yeah.
And how much courage it takes to defend reason and truth when faced with oppression.
Powerful.
Yeah.
But even though the Vienna Circle was dispersed,
Their ideas didn't die,
their legacy lived on.
inspiring generations of thinkers.
To keep searching for clarity and a more just world. It's like planting seeds that keep growing
I like that.
long after the gardener is gone.
Beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
And while their dream of a unified science may not have come true,
And some say it never will.
right, their contributions to philosophy, especially the philosophy of science, were huge.
So they didn't achieve total unification
But they changed how we think about science.
and its place in society,
Exactly. They pushed the limits of philosophy.
challenging old ways of thinking.
And they left behind a legacy of intellectual honesty and social responsibility
A belief in the power of reason.
to understand the world.
It's incredible to think that a small group of intellectuals meeting in coffee houses and seminars,
Could have such a huge impact.
but that's the power of ideas,
It is.
transcending borders and time,
Living on after their creators.
shaping the world even after they're gone.
Powerful stuff. But before we get too sentimental, let's imagine the Vienna Circle today,
Okay.
dealing with artificial intelligence,
Right.
the internet, the metaverse.
Things that would have blown their minds.
Totally. I bet their focus on logic and evidence
Yeah,
would lead to some pretty interesting debates
I think so too.
about the nature of these new technologies and
Yeah.
how they're shaping society.
It's fun to think about.
But I do think their core principles, the
Yeah.
need for clear thinking, questioning assumptions, relying on evidence, those are more important now than ever.
It's like they gave us this toolkit
I like that.
for navigating the 21st century.
A way to cut through all the noise
Yeah.
and make sense of the world.
Exactly. They were pioneers in critical thinking,
For sure.
and their work inspires us to approach knowledge with a healthy dose of skepticism.
And humility, too.
Let's go back to their big project,
Okay.
their quest for a unified science.
Yeah.
We talked about how tough that goal was,
Mm,
and that some think it's impossible.
right.
But even if they didn't create this all-encompassing system of knowledge,
Their efforts weren't wasted.
they weren't.
They laid the groundwork for a more rigorous approach to science.
I see.
Their focus on logic and language,
Yeah.
connecting theory to observation, that shaped how we think about science today.
So they may not have reached the peak of that unified science mountain
But they definitely blazed a trail.
for others to follow.
Exactly. And people are still exploring that trail today.
Really?
Fields like cognitive science, complexity theory,
Wow.
even efforts to bridge science and the humanities.
That's pretty cool.
It is. The Vienna Circle's influence is all over modern thought.
It's amazing to think a small group of intellectuals
Meeting in coffee houses and seminars.
could have such a lasting impact.
Yeah, it's a reminder that ideas,
Can transcend time and place.
they really can. Their story shows us that intellectual curiosity,
Oh.
combined with a commitment to making the world better,
Yeah.
can be a powerful force.
So powerful.
Yeah.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the Vienna Circle,
What a journey.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to think about?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
What's their most lasting legacy? I think the Vienna Circle would tell us to never stop questioning, to
Okay.
always be open to new ideas,
Mhm.
and to use what we know to make a more just world.
I love that.
It's a call to action, an invitation to think critically and responsibly.
And with compassion.
Exactly. Both as individuals.
And together.
That's a message that really matters today.
I agree. If you want to explore the Vienna Circle further,
Definitely do.
check out their manifesto.
Yeah.
The Scientific Conception of the World.
That's a good one.
And don't forget the other works we talked about.
So much to learn.
Remember, the search for knowledge never ends.
That's the fun part.
So stay curious.
And keep exploring.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating adventure into the world of ideas.